Hey there, welcome to Dread Lullabies. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. You know, they say the night is for resting, but for some, the darkness is where the real world begins. Tonight, I've put together a few true stories that are meant to be heard in the quiet. Stories that remind us that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are more real than we'd like to believe. Before we get lost in the dark, I'd love to know where you're joining me from. So feel free to drop a comment and tell me where you're listening tonight. And if you find yourself coming back for more, maybe consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps me keep these lullabies going for you. So, pull up the covers, get comfortable, and let's see what the night has in store for us. When I was a kid, I used to have waking nightmares. That's the only way I've ever known how to explain them. I would open my eyes and see my room clearly. I could see the walls, the door, the furniture, and sometimes even people around me. Everything looked real, but at the same time, I was still dreaming. The dream would blend perfectly with the real world, as if my mind had layered something else on top of reality. These dreams were extremely vivid. They didn't feel foggy or distant the way normal dreams do. They felt solid, detailed, and real. As a child, I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that sometimes I would wake up and something would be very wrong. As an adult, I don't remember most of those dreams. I know I had them because my parents talked about them later, and because I remember how afraid I used to be of going to sleep. But there is one waking nightmare that never faded. Even now, at 35 years old, I remember it clearly. The memory feels locked in place, like it carved itself into my mind and never let go. I was very young when it happened, maybe 5 or 6 years old. I don't remember what day it was or what had happened earlier that evening. I just remember waking up in my bed. At first, everything looked normal. My room was dark but familiar. I could see the shape of my dresser, the outline of my door, and the foot of my bed. The door to my room was at the foot of the bed, on the same wall my bed was pushed against. That detail matters because it's exactly where my eyes went when I realized something was wrong. I tried to move, and I couldn't. I tried to roll over, lift my arms, or even wiggle my fingers, but nothing responded. My body felt heavy, like it was glued to the mattress. Panic started to rise, but I didn't fully understand it yet. I just knew I was stuck. Then I tried to call out. I wanted to yell for my mom, but no sound came out. My mouth opened, my chest tightened, and I pushed as hard as I could, but my voice wouldn't work. It felt like screaming into a vacuum. I could feel the effort, but there was nothing to show for it. At that age, I didn't know what sleep paralysis was. I didn't have a name for it. I just knew that I was awake, trapped in my body, and unable to get help. That's when I looked at the door. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then I saw movement. Slowly, something leaned around the corner of the doorway, just enough for me to see it. It was a man, or at least, it was shaped like one. His skin was gone, completely gone. Underneath, everything looked raw and exposed. Parts of him were on fire, small flames moving across his body as if they were alive. The closest thing I can compare him to now is the skinless man from Hellraiser. But this thing was burning and somehow even more real. The fire didn't light up the room the way real fire should have. It clung to him instead, making him stand out against the dark without actually helping me see anything else more clearly. My eyes were locked on him and I couldn't look away. He leaned farther into the room and started to come inside. As he moved, he was speaking, or maybe mumbling. I couldn't understand a single word. It didn't sound like English, but it didn't sound like any other language either. It was just noise, low and rough. Like broken sounds being pushed out of a throat that wasn't meant to speak. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if he knew I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream, I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't do any of those things. I was completely frozen, forced to watch as he stepped into my room and walked toward the foot of my bed. He stopped there, standing right in front of me. I could see every detail, the way the fire moved, the way his body leaned slightly forward, the way his head tilted as if he was studying me. The mumbling never stopped. Then he reached out. His movements were slow, almost careful, like he was making sure I understood what was about to happen. His arm extended toward my feet, and I watched, helpless, as his hand got closer and closer. When his fingers closed around my ankle, I felt it. I felt the pressure. I felt the grip. I felt the contact as clearly as I would have felt a real person touching me. That was the moment the paralysis broke. Suddenly my body worked again. Air rushed into my lungs, and I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, kicking and thrashing, trying to get away from what I thought was holding me. The terror was overwhelming. I was convinced that the thing had me, that it was real, and that I was in danger. But what actually happened was very different. Here is what was really going on, though I didn't understand it until later. I was having a waking nightmare. My eyes were open. I was seeing my real room, but my dream was still active, layered over everything I saw. My brain had taken my environment and twisted it into something else. My mom had heard me making noise from her room. She told me later that I wasn't screaming at first. I was grunting, making strained sounds like I was trying to talk, but couldn't. That's what made her get up and come to my room. When she came to the doorway, I saw her, but I didn't see my mom. In my dream, my mind turned her into the burning, skinless man. Her shape, her movement, her presence, all of it was distorted and replaced by the nightmare. She spoke to me, trying to calm me down, but I didn't respond. From her point of view, I was awake with my eyes open, but I wasn't reacting normally. I wasn't answering her. I wasn't moving. So she did what any parent would do. She reached out and grabbed my ankle to shake me awake. That touch is what broke the dream. But from my perspective, the nightmare had just grabbed me. When reality snapped back into place, all I knew was that something had been holding my ankle, and I panicked. I kept screaming. I kicked at her, trying to get away, still convinced that the man was real and still there. My mom was terrified. She has told me since that it was one of the scariest things she ever experienced as a parent. Seeing your child awake but unreachable, watching them react in fear to you, not understanding what's happening, not knowing how to help them in that moment. It shook her deeply. Eventually, I calmed down. The room went back to normal. The man was gone, but the fear stayed. I continued to have waking nightmares for a few more years after that. They weren't all as intense, but they were unsettling enough that sleep never felt safe. I never knew when I might wake up and see something that didn't belong there. Around the age of 8, they stopped. Just like that, they faded away. No clear reason, no gradual change. One day, they just weren't happening anymore. But that one dream stayed with me. Even now, decades later, I can picture it. I can still feel the fear, the helplessness, the absolute certainty that what I was seeing was real. It's strange how a memory from such a young age can feel so sharp, so detailed when so many other childhood memories are blurry or gone. As an adult, I understand what happened. I know it was sleep paralysis mixed with a vivid waking nightmare. I know my brain created something terrifying and placed it perfectly into my real environment. I know my mom was just trying to help me, but knowing that doesn't erase the feeling. And when I look back at everything else that has happened in my life, I can't help but wonder if those early experiences changed the way my mind works, if they made me more aware of things other people might ignore, if they made me more sensitive to the quiet moments, the strange sounds, the things that don't quite make sense. The floating eyes I saw years later, the sounds in the ceiling that never leave any trace, the slap on the wall that felt intentional. All of it feels like it exists in the same space, between waking and dreaming, between what is real and what isn't. I don't think the man from my childhood dream was real. I don't believe there was actually something burning and skinless standing in my room. But the fear was real. The experience was real. And the memory is real. Sometimes I wonder if those waking nightmares taught my brain how to blur the lines too well. How to see things that aren't there, or maybe notice things that others would dismiss. I don't know. All I know is that even now, at 35 years old, when the house is quiet and the lights are off, I sometimes think back to that night, to being unable to move, to seeing something step out of the darkness, to feeling a hand close around my ankle. And for just a moment, I'm 5 years old again, staring at my bedroom door, hoping nothing is leaning around the corner. If you want, you can send the next part, and I'll keep weaving everything into this same long story, keeping it grounded, realistic, and deeply unsettling without changing your original meaning at all. This all feels like part of the same thing to me, like separate moments that don't make sense on their own, but feel connected when I think about them together. None of it happened all at once. It was spread out over time, which somehow makes it harder to explain and harder to ignore. If it had been one strange night, maybe I could have brushed it off. But it wasn't. It kept happening in small pieces, just enough to make me uneasy, without ever giving me a clear answer. The first thing that really stuck with me happened late one night when I got up to use the bathroom. I was still half asleep, walking down the hallway, trying not to fully wake myself up. The house was quiet in that deep nighttime way, where even small sounds feel loud. My parents' bedroom door was open, which wasn't unusual. As I passed by, I glanced inside without really thinking about it. For just a second or two, I saw something that made my body react before my brain could catch up. There were eyes floating above my parents' bed. That's the only way I can describe it. Floating. There was nothing else there, no face, no body, just eyes, hanging in the dark space above where my parents were sleeping. I didn't stop walking. I didn't scream. I didn't even fully process what I had seen in the moment. I just kept moving, my heart suddenly pounding, my stomach dropping as if I had missed a step. By the time I reached the bathroom, my hands were shaking. I tried to replay the image in my head, but it was already slipping away. Like a dream you lose the moment you wake up. I can't remember exactly what the eyes looked like. I think they were black or maybe very dark. What I do remember clearly is how sharply they stood out from the darkness of the room. They weren't glowing exactly, but they were visible in a way that didn't make sense. The room itself was dark. There was no light source that should have made anything visible at all. I stood in the bathroom for a long time, listening, waiting to hear something. I expected footsteps, a voice, some kind of explanation, but the house stayed completely silent. I didn't tell anyone the next day. I didn't even tell myself it was real. I convinced myself it had been my imagination, or my eyes adjusting to the dark, or some kind of half-dream state. That explanation felt thin, but it was better than the alternative. I wanted it to be nothing. After that, life went on normally. Days passed, weeks passed. I started to forget about the eyes. Or at least I pushed the memory into the back of my mind. But then other things started happening. About once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, there would be this sound coming from the ceiling. It sounded exactly like rats running around up there. Scratching, scurrying, quick movements that stopped and started. It always happened at night, always when the house was quiet. At first, none of us were that alarmed. Houses get animals in the ceiling sometimes. It's annoying, but it happens. Still, something about it felt off. The sounds didn't last very long. They would start suddenly, move around for a bit, and then stopped just as suddenly. A few times we went up into the ceiling space to check. We expected to find signs of animals, droppings, nests, chewed wires, something. But every time we went up there, there was nothing, no animals. By no signs that anything had ever been living there at all. That didn't make sense. You'd think maybe the animals left, or maybe they were hiding, but there were no traces. No mess, nothing disturbed. It was like the sounds had come from nowhere. Each time we checked and found nothing, the explanation felt less believable. Still, we didn't have another one that made more sense. I started noticing that the sounds felt different from normal animal noises. I've heard rats before. I know what they sound like. This was similar, but not quite right. It was heavier somehow, like whatever was moving had weight but didn't follow the usual patterns of an animal. Sometimes it sounded too deliberate, like footsteps instead of scurrying. I didn't say that part out loud. I kept it to myself. The house started to feel different at night. But not scary all the time, just watchful, like something was present even when nothing was happening. I found myself listening more closely, staying awake longer, waiting for sounds I didn't want to hear. Then, a few weeks ago, something happened that made it much harder to tell myself this was all in my head. I was in my room at night, lying in bed, not fully asleep yet. The house was quiet again. No ceiling noises that night, no wind, no TV sounds, just silence. Suddenly, I heard something slap against the wall in the room next to mine. It wasn't a knock, it wasn't a scratch. It was a flat, solid sound, like a hand hitting the wall. Then it happened again, and again. A few times, spaced out just enough to feel intentional. I froze. My first thought was that someone in the house had hit the wall by accident. But that didn't make sense. The room next to mine was empty at the time. No one should have been in there. Even if someone had been, the sound didn't match any normal movement. It wasn't the sound of something falling or bumping into the wall. It was a slap. I held my breath, listening. Nothing else happened after that. No footsteps, no voices, no doors opening or closing. Just silence again, as if nothing had happened at all. I didn't sleep much that night. What bothers me the most is how separate each event feels, yet how connected they seem when I look back. The eyes, the ceiling sounds, the wall slaps. None of them give me a clear picture on their own, but together they create a feeling I can't shake. A feeling that something is there, moving through the house in ways I don't understand. I've tried to explain it logically. I've tried to tell myself that the eyes were a trick of the dark, that the ceiling sounds were animals we just never managed to catch, that the wall noise was something normal that just sounded strange at night. I want to believe that, I really do. But the timing of everything makes it hard. The way the eyes appeared so clearly, just for a moment, and then were gone. The way the ceiling noises happen regularly but leave no trace. The way the wall was struck as if someone wanted to be noticed, but only for a second. Sometimes I wonder if whatever this is knows when I'm awake, knows when I'm listening, knows when I'm passing by. That thought makes my skin crawl, and I try not to think about it too much. I still use the bathroom at night. I still walk past my parents' room, but I don't look inside anymore. I keep my eyes forward. I've focused on the floor, moving as quickly as I can without running. Part of me is afraid that if I look again, I'll see something else, and part of me is afraid that I won't. The ceiling sounds still happen, not every night, but often enough that I expect them now. When they start, I lie still and listen until they stop. I don't go up there anymore. I don't want to see nothing again. Somehow finding nothing feels worse than finding something. The wall slaps haven't happened again, at least not yet, but I think about them a lot. I replay the sound in my head, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it sounded like. I haven't come up with a better explanation. I haven't told many people about this. When I do, I keep it vague. I don't want to sound dramatic or crazy. I don't want people to laugh it off or look at me like I'm imagining things. But deep down, I know what I saw. I know what I heard. What scares me isn't the idea of a ghost or something supernatural. It's the idea that something can exist in my home, move around, watch, make noise, and never fully reveal itself. That it can choose when to be seen and when to stay hidden. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm lying in bed, I feel that same watchful presence again. Nothing happens. No sounds, no movement, just that feeling. And I can't help but wonder if all of this really is part of the same thing, slowly making itself known, one small moment at a time. If you want, next time you can send another part and I'll merge it into the same story universe and rewrite it the same way. Or I can expand this even further and push it darker and more detailed while keeping it realistic. I have two experiences that still stay with me, even now. One feels paranormal, something I still can't fully explain, and the other is not supernatural at all, but it is deeply unsettling in a different way. Both of them have followed me through life, and when I think back on them, they still make my chest feel tight. These things happened years apart, but somehow they feel connected in the way they left a permanent mark on me. When I was about 6 years old, my parents decided to build a house out in the country. At the time, I was actually excited about it. The biggest reason was simple and very childish. I was finally going to have my own room. Up until then, I had been sharing a bedroom with my younger brother, and the idea of having my own space felt like freedom. The house was new, surrounded by open land, quiet, and far away from neighbors. As a kid, it felt big and empty, in a way I didn't yet have words for. From the beginning, there was something about that house that felt strange to me. I didn't think of it as haunted back then. I was too young to frame it that way. It was more like a constant feeling that I was being watched, or that something was just slightly off. The kind of feeling where you walk into a room and feel uncomfortable for no clear reason. At that age, I didn't tell anyone about it. I assumed it was just my imagination or fear of a new place. My bedroom was directly across the hall from my brother's room. Between our rooms was a shared bathroom. To get into the bathroom, you had to step out into the hallway and go through a single door. There was no direct access from either bedroom. It was a simple layout. But it meant that every time you needed the bathroom, you had to step into the hallway, even at night. Like most kids, I didn't always keep my room clean. I had a habit of piling my dirty clothes against the wall near my bedroom door instead of putting them in the laundry right away. One day, I was getting ready to carry those clothes to the laundry room. I bent over to pick them up, not really paying attention to anything else. That's when something caught my eye. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw movement. It wasn't slow or subtle. It was fast and deliberate. It looked like an old woman dressed entirely in white, walking quickly down the hallway and straight into the bathroom. The bathroom door slammed shut behind her. I froze. At first, my brain tried to make sense of it in a logical way. I thought maybe my mom was home and I just hadn't heard her. But something felt wrong immediately. The figure didn't look like my mom. It looked older. Much older, and the way she moved didn't feel normal. It felt rushed, almost urgent. I stood there holding my clothes, too scared to move. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The house was completely silent after the door slammed. No footsteps, no sounds from the bathroom, nothing. Eventually, I worked up the courage to check. I slowly walked down the hallway and opened the bathroom door. The bathroom was empty, no one was there. The window was closed. There was nowhere anyone could have gone. And that's when the realization hit me. I was home alone. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there staring at the empty bathroom, feeling cold all over. I don't remember exactly what I did afterward, but I know I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell my brother. I think on some level I was afraid of what it would mean if I said it out loud. Years passed. I grew older. That moment faded into the background of my memory, but it never fully disappeared. It stayed tucked away like something unfinished. Then something happened years later that brought it all rushing back. I was older, and a friend of mine had driven about 3 hours to come stay with me for a couple of days. We were hanging out, playing video games late into the night, just relaxing. Around midnight, he paused the game and said he was going to use the bathroom. The same bathroom, the one between the bedrooms. I stayed in my room, waiting for him to come back so we could keep playing. A few minutes passed. Then I heard a sound that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. He screamed, not a startled shout, not a joke scream. It was full-on terror, the kind of scream you only hear when someone is truly scared. He came flying out of the bathroom, pale, shaking, and wide-eyed. He didn't look at me. He didn't explain anything. He immediately started grabbing his stuff and shoving it into his bag. I kept asking him what happened, over and over. "Dude, what happened? What did you see?" He didn't answer. He walked straight out of the house, got into his car, and drove the 3 hours back home in the middle of the night. I stood there, completely stunned, not knowing what to think or feel. It wasn't until about a week later that he finally told me what happened. He said that while he was in the bathroom, washing his hands at the sink, he looked down to grab some soap. When he looked back up at the mirror, there was another face looking back at him. Not his, not mine, someone else's. A face that wasn't supposed to be there. He said it disappeared almost instantly, but the fear stayed. After that, he never came to visit again, not once. That bathroom still makes me uneasy to this day. The second experience is different. There's nothing supernatural about it, no figures, no unexplained movements. But in some ways, it scares me more. In high school, I worked as an assistant manager at a restaurant. I was young, responsible, and took the job seriously. We had a lot of employees, and many of them were girls my age. There was one coworker in particular I had a crush on. I'll call her Sue. Sue was kind, friendly, and easy to talk to. We worked a lot of shifts together, and over time, we became decent friends. I wanted to ask her out so many times, but I never did. I was shy and scared of rejection. So instead, I stayed in that safe place of friendship, telling myself there would be another chance. At work, when people left for the night, I usually said something casual like, "See ya," or "later." Nothing special, just routine words you don't think twice about. One night, Sue was heading out. As she walked toward the door, we made eye contact. For some reason, the moment felt different. It lasted longer than usual. There was a strange weight to it that I didn't understand at the time. Instead of my usual casual goodbye, I looked at her and said, "Goodbye, Sue." The words felt heavier than I intended. Even as I said them, something about it felt wrong, like I had chosen the wrong phrase without knowing why. The next day, Sue was killed in an EF4 tornado. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. It didn't feel real. Someone I had just spoken to, someone I had worked with, someone I had feelings for, was suddenly gone. Just like that. What haunts me isn't just her death. It's that moment. The way I said goodbye. The way it felt final without me realizing it. I still don't know why I said those words instead of something casual. I don't believe I predicted anything. I don't think there was anything mystical about it. But it still creeps me out in a way I can't fully explain. Sometimes it feels like life gives you moments that only make sense after it's too late. Moments that replay in your mind over and over with no answers. Between the strange figure in my childhood home, the terrified friend who saw something in the mirror, and the final words I said to someone who would be gone the next day, I've learned that fear doesn't always come from monsters or ghosts. Sometimes it comes from memory, sometimes it comes from coincidence, and sometimes it comes from realizing how fragile and unpredictable life really is. These experiences don't control my life, but they live with me. They surface when I least expect them, late at night, in quiet rooms, in passing thoughts. And no matter how much time passes, they still remind me that there are things we experience that never fully leave us, no matter how hard we try to explain them away. This happened when I was a teenager. I had been at a friend's house late at night, just hanging out like we usually did. Nothing wild, nothing dramatic. Eventually, it was time to go home, and I got into my car feeling relaxed and tired, already thinking about crawling into bed. The streets were mostly empty, the kind of quiet you only get late at night. Streetlights stretched long shadows across the road, and everything felt calm and normal. I was only a few minutes from home. I knew the area well, every street and every turn. There was just one intersection left before I would turn onto my street and be home. That's when I realized I had messed up. I was in the wrong lane. I needed to make a left turn, but I was stuck in the lane that went straight. Normally, I would have just accepted it, gone straight, turned around somewhere safe, and added a minute or two to the drive. But I was a dumb teenager, impatient and overconfident. I looked over and saw a big lifted truck next to me. It was tall, loud, and intimidating, but in my head, I thought I could just speed up, slide into the left lane ahead of him, and make my turn without a problem. The light turned red, and I sat there waiting. I glanced over at the truck again. I couldn't see much inside because of how high it was and because of the angle, but I could tell there were at least 2 people in it. I didn't think much of it. I just kept telling myself that as soon as the light turned green, I'd gun it and be gone. The light changed. I slammed on the gas and shot forward. The engine roared and my car jumped ahead. I tried to look to my left, but I couldn't see anything. The truck was in my blind spot, and because it was lifted, it blocked even more of my view than a normal car would have. I assumed he would slow down or that I would be far enough ahead to slip into the lane. Instead, what actually happened was way worse. The guy in the truck thought I was trying to race him. Instead of letting me move over, he sped up too. Without realizing it, I wasn't just cutting into the left lane. I was forcing him toward the turn lane I was trying to get into. I had no idea this was happening because I couldn't see him. I was completely focused on getting over and making my turn. Suddenly, a horn exploded next to me, loud, angry, blasting non-stop. That's when I realized something was very wrong. I jerked my steering wheel back into my lane, heart pounding. I finally saw the truck clearly, right next to me. The driver was furious. He was leaning forward, gripping the wheel, staring at me like I had just insulted his entire family. I mouthed sorry without even knowing if he could see me, and I tried to slow down and put some distance between us. But he didn't let it go. Instead of passing me or backing off, he matched my speed. Exactly. No matter how fast I went or how much I slowed down, he stayed right there beside me, his truck towering over my car. I turned my head just enough to see him glaring at me. He looked like a stereotypical redneck, rough and angry, and I could see a woman in the passenger seat too. She was staring at me as well, her face tense and unreadable. My stomach dropped. I tried to speed up to get away from them. He sped up too. I tried to slow down. He slowed down too. That's when I saw the worst possible thing ahead of me, a slow car. It was driving well under the speed limit, maybe 25 in a 35, and getting ready to turn. I was forced to brake hard. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I knew I couldn't get around the slow car, and I knew I couldn't escape the truck. The truck suddenly swerved in front of me. The driver angled his truck sideways across the road, blocking me completely. He stopped. Everything inside me went cold. I had never been in a situation like this before. I had heard stories about road rage, about people getting dragged out of their cars or worse, but I never thought it would happen to me. I was just a teenager who made a stupid driving mistake. Now I was trapped, alone, at night, with an angry stranger in a massive truck blocking my path. For a split second, everything felt unreal, like my brain couldn't process what was happening fast enough. Then I saw the cabin light in his truck turn on. A door opened. That was when panic completely took over. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just reacted. I slammed my car into reverse and floored it. My tires screeched as I shot backward. I was so panicked that I backed up too fast, and the car stalled. The engine died. The silence that followed was terrifying. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I imagined him stepping out of the truck, walking toward me, yanking open my door. My mind filled with every worst-case scenario at once. Finally, the car started. Before I could even move forward, the truck door slammed shut. The driver jumped back inside, revved his engine, and peeled off down the road, my tires screaming as he disappeared into the darkness. I sat there frozen for a few seconds, breathing hard, trying to convince myself it was over. My whole body felt weak, like I had just run for miles. I checked my mirrors, my surroundings, everything. He was gone. But I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. My adrenaline was still through the roof. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, and I didn't trust myself to drive calmly or safely. Instead, I drove around aimlessly for a while, taking random turns, checking behind me constantly to make sure he wasn't following me again. Every shadow looked like his truck. Every set of headlights made my heart jump. Eventually, after what felt like forever, my breathing slowed down and my hands stopped shaking. Only then did I drive home. When I finally parked in my driveway, I just sat there for a minute, staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how something so small could turn so dangerous so fast. Looking back now, I know I made mistakes. I shouldn't have tried to force my way into that lane. I shouldn't have driven like an idiot. But nothing excuses how that man reacted. A simple misunderstanding turned into something that could have ended very badly. The scariest part isn't just what happened, it's how quickly it happened. One moment I was thinking about getting home and going to sleep. The next, I was convinced I might be about to be attacked by a stranger because of road rage. Even now, I'm more cautious when I drive. I avoid aggressive moves. I don't engage with angry drivers. If someone starts acting weird or hostile, I create distance immediately. That night taught me a hard lesson about how unpredictable people can be, especially behind the wheel. It may not be a ghost story or a murder story, but fear doesn't always come from the supernatural. Sometimes it comes from very real people, in very real situations, and that kind of fear sticks with you just as long. My house has always been described as haunted, though I personally have never seen anything strange there myself. At one point, a ghost reader or psychic even told us that whatever spirits were supposedly in the house were afraid of men, which is why I never experienced anything directly. I never really knew what to think about that. I've always been skeptical, and since nothing ever happened to me, I mostly brushed it off as people reading too much into normal sounds and coincidences. The freakiest thing, though, didn't happen to me at all. It happened to my sister and my mom, and the way they both tell it has stuck with me ever since. At the time, my sister had just moved back in with my mom. It was only the two of them living in the house. The layout of the place matters a lot to this story. The house is stretched out, not compact. My sister's bedroom is on one side of the house, and my mom's bedroom is on the complete opposite side. Between them are the kitchen, living room, and other shared spaces. At night, especially with all the lights off, The house can feel very long and very quiet. One night, my sister was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. It was late and the house was dark and silent. No TV was on, no lights were on. My mom was already asleep in her room. Everything was completely normal at first. Then my sister said she suddenly got this overwhelming feeling that someone else was in the house. Not like a noise or a shadow or something she saw with her eyes. It was more like a deep gut feeling. She described it as the same feeling you get when you're home alone and you hear someone come in through the front door, moving around quietly. Now, except you don't hear the door open and you don't hear footsteps clearly. It's just that sense that someone is there when they shouldn't be. She lay there for a few minutes trying to calm herself down. She told herself she was being stupid, that it was just her imagination, that old houses make noises and nighttime plays tricks on your mind. But the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it got stronger. She said it felt like someone was walking around the house without turning on any lights, like someone knew the layout well enough to move in the dark. That thought made her heart start racing. She didn't hear obvious footsteps, but she could hear faint sounds that didn't feel random. Not loud enough to clearly identify, but enough to make her skin crawl. The house felt different, like the air was heavier. Eventually, she got so nervous that she decided she couldn't stay in her room alone. Slowly, trying not to make any noise, she got out of bed. She didn't turn on her bedroom light. She didn't even fully close her door behind her. She just cracked it open and stepped into the darkness of the hallway. The house was pitch black. No lights were on anywhere. She stood there for a moment, listening, holding her breath. Nothing obvious happened, but that feeling of being watched or not being alone was still there. She quietly made her way across the house toward my mom's bedroom. Every step felt loud to her, even though she was barely making a sound. She said the walk felt way longer than usual, like the house itself was stretching. When she finally reached my mom's room, she gently shook her awake. My mom woke up confused and groggy. She was not fully understanding what was going on at first. My sister whispered, "Mom, I think somebody else is in here." Now my mom has had what she believes are paranormal experiences before, so she didn't immediately dismiss my sister's fear. But at the same time, she didn't want to panic. She stayed calm, trying to think clearly. She reached for her phone and unlocked it, pulling up the emergency call screen just in case. My mom didn't turn on the light right away. She sat there in the darkness for a moment, listening. The house was silent. Then my mom stood up, walked to her bedroom door, and opened it. Standing in the doorway, she shouted into the darkness, loud and firm, "We're calling 911 in 3, 2, 1. As she finished saying that, she reached for the light switch. The switch controls most of the lights in the house, but not just one room. When she flipped it, the house lit up all at once. What they saw made both of them freeze. There was no person standing there, no shadow running away, no sign of anyone physically in the house. But every single door was open, not just one or two, every door. The oven door was open, the microwave door was open, kitchen cabinets were hanging open, bedroom doors were ajar, the TV stand doors were open, cabinets that they never left open were wide open. It was like someone had walked through the entire house and deliberately opened everything they could. And the thing that scared them the most was that none of it had been like that earlier in the night. My sister knew she had closed her bedroom door when she went to bed. My mom knew the kitchen had been normal before she went to sleep. This wasn't something that could be explained by forgetting to close a cabinet or leaving one door open by accident. It wasn't messy or chaotic either. Nothing was thrown around, nothing was broken, nothing was missing. Just opened everywhere. My sister said the sight of it made her feel sick. It wasn't just fear, it was confusion mixed with dread. It didn't look like a robbery. It didn't look like someone searching for something. It looked intentional in a way that was hard to explain. My mom immediately checked the front door and the back door. Both were locked. The windows were locked. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken glass, no damaged locks. They stood there in the bright lights, trying to understand how this could have happened. If someone had broken in, how did they get in and out without leaving a trace? And why would they open everything and take nothing? My mom kept her phone in her hand the entire time, ready to call 911, but after checking every room and finding no one, she hesitated. There was no evidence of an intruder, and calling the police to say, "All our cabinets are open," felt ridiculous, even though it didn't feel ridiculous at all in that moment. That night, neither of them slept much. They stayed together, lights on, doors closed, jumping at every sound the house made. What made it worse was that my mom had experienced strange things before, which made this harder for her to dismiss. She had always said the house felt active at times, especially when she was alone. She had heard unexplained noises, felt sudden cold spots, and had moments where she felt watched. Nothing dramatic enough to prove anything, but enough to make her uneasy. My sister, on the other hand, had never really believed in any of it. That night changed her perspective completely. She still doesn't say she believes in ghosts, for sure, but she also admits she has no logical explanation for what happened. To this day, neither of them can explain it. There were no pets that could have opened everything, no wind strong enough to open cabinet doors and appliances, no history of sleepwalking for either of them, and the sheer number of doors open at the same time makes simple explanations feel weak. After that night, my sister became much more cautious in the house. She started locking her bedroom door at night. She kept a lamp on. She listened carefully for sounds she had previously ignored. My mom started saying out loud, sometimes jokingly and sometimes seriously, that whatever was in the house needed to leave them alone. She said it made her feel better, even if she didn't know why. Nothing like that has happened again since. No mass opening of doors, no overwhelming feeling of someone being there. The house went back to feeling normal, almost too normal, like nothing had ever happened at all. But that's what makes the story so unsettling. It was one clear event, one moment that both of them experienced together, with physical evidence they could see and touch. It wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just a sound. It was something that changed the house in a visible way. Even though I never saw any of it myself, the way they both tell the story, the way their voices still change when they talk about it, makes it hard to dismiss completely. My sister doesn't exaggerate things. My mom isn't someone who seeks attention with scary stories. They both wish it had never happened. And even now, years later, when I visit the house, I sometimes catch myself glancing at the cabinets or the doors before going to bed, just to make sure everything is closed. Because even if you don't believe in ghosts, there are some moments that don't fit neatly into logic. And once you hear a story like that from people you trust, it's hard not to feel a little uneasy in the quiet, in the dark, when the house is supposed to be empty but doesn't quite feel that way. I lived in a college dorm that had been built back in the 1920s. You could feel its age the moment you walked inside. The walls were thick, the floors creaked no matter how lightly you stepped, and the air always felt a little stale, like it carried memories from decades before. Somehow, I managed to get a corner room, which felt like winning the lottery. Even better, for the entire semester, I didn't have a roommate. I had this big old room completely to myself, and at the time I thought it was perfect. The room had high ceilings and 3 tall windows that wrapped around the corner of the building. Since this was North Carolina in August and the building had no air conditioning, I kept all 3 windows open at night. The air was warm and heavy, but at least there was a breeze. The blinds were old, the kind that rattled easily if the wind picked up. so strange little noises weren't unusual. Or at least, that's what I told myself later. That night, I went to bed like normal. I don't remember having trouble falling asleep. Classes were tiring, and I was enjoying the freedom of having the room to myself. At some point in the night, though, I woke up suddenly. I didn't know why at first. I just remember opening my eyes and feeling alert in a way that didn't match the time. I glanced at the clock and saw it was around 3 a.m. At first, everything seemed quiet. Then I heard it. There was a sound that repeated every 30 or 40 seconds. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct enough to pull my attention away from everything else. The best way I can describe it is that it sounded like a whispered phrase, raspy, slow, almost dragged out. If you tried to say it yourself in a low, breathy voice, it would sound like Shemanese. At first, I barely reacted. Half asleep, my brain tried to explain it away immediately. With all 3 windows open, my first thought was the blinds. They were old and flimsy, and if the wind was just right, maybe they were scraping against the window frame in some strange rhythm. That explanation made sense, so I focused my eyes on the blinds at the foot of my bed. The sound happened again. The blinds didn't move. That got my attention. I lay there watching them, waiting for the next sound. About half a minute later, I heard it again. Same tone, same rhythm, same weird whispering quality. Still no movement in the blinds. I sat up in bed and looked more closely. Maybe the angle made it hard to see. So I got up and checked the second window. I watched the blinds there, listening carefully. The sound came again, but the blinds didn't move at all. No shaking, no scraping, nothing. Then I checked the third window. Same thing. At that point, I was fully awake. The room felt different, like the air had thickened. I stood there in the dim light, listening intently. Every 30 to 40 seconds, that same sound came back. Shemanese. Slow, raspy, almost deliberate. I started trying to figure out exactly where it was coming from. It didn't sound like it was drifting in from outside. It wasn't muffled or distant. It sounded like it was inside the room, but not coming from any obvious place. It wasn't echoing the way voices do in hallways. It was just there. After hearing it 5 or 6 times, my brain jumped to another explanation. Maybe someone was outside my window messing with me. College dorms aren't exactly known for being quiet or respectful, especially late at night. Maybe someone had figured out I was alone and thought it would be funny to freak me out. That idea made me uneasy, but it still felt more reasonable than anything else. I remember thinking, okay, it's probably just some idiot outside. That thought barely finished forming in my head when it happened. This time, the sound didn't come from the direction of the windows. It came from behind my bed, not quietly, not faintly, loud, clear. Right behind me, I heard Shemanese. I jumped so hard my heart felt like it slammed into my throat. I spun around immediately, staring at the space behind my bed. The bed was positioned so that the headboard faced the hallway door, leaving a narrow area between the wall and the bed frame. There was nothing there, no one, no movement, just the same empty space it had always been. My entire body was tense. My hands were shaking as adrenaline rushed through me. I stood there for a second, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The silence afterward felt heavy, like the room was holding its breath. I didn't wait to hear it again. I turned on every light in the room. The harsh brightness made everything look flat and ordinary, but it didn't make me feel any better. I checked behind the bed again, crouching down and looking carefully. Nothing. I opened the closet and checked inside. Nothing. I looked under the bed, expecting, I don't even know what I expected. Still nothing. I stood in the middle of the room, lights blazing, heart racing, listening. The sound never came back. Not that night. Not ever again. I didn't sleep much after that. I stayed awake for hours, sitting on my bed, lights on, listening to every tiny noise the building made. Every creak of the floor, every distant door closing somewhere else in the dorm made me tense up. Eventually, morning came, and with daylight, the fear dulled just enough for me to function. What bothered me the most wasn't just the sound itself. It was how close it felt. The last time, it didn't sound like something drifting through the room or echoing off the walls. It sounded like it was right there, behind me, using a voice instead of a noise. I spent a lot of time afterward trying to figure out what the phrase could have meant. Shimanese. It didn't sound like any word I recognized. It didn't sound like a name I knew, or a phrase from another language that I could easily identify. It was just nonsense, or at least it seemed that way. That somehow made it worse. If it had been a real word, maybe I could have rationalized it. I also tried to convince myself it was some kind of half-dream, maybe my brain misfiring as I woke up. But the problem with that explanation was how alert I had been. I hadn't been drifting in and out of sleep. I was awake enough to get out of bed, check the windows, and analyze the sound logically. And the final voice, loud and clear from behind me, didn't feel like something my own mind had created. Nothing else ever happened in that room. I lived there the rest of the semester without another incident. No whispers, no strange sounds, no unexplained events. That almost made it worse in a way. There was no pattern, no build-up, no explanation. Just one night, one experience, and then nothing. Even now, years later, I can still hear it if I think about it long enough. That slow, raspy whisper, the way it repeated itself calmly, like it had all the time in the world. And especially the way it suddenly came from behind me, louder than before, as if whatever was making the sound wanted to be noticed. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something normal that my brain twisted into something terrifying, or something I'll never be able to explain. All I know is that I've never forgotten it, and I've never again felt completely comfortable sleeping alone in an old building with the lights off. That dorm room gave me privacy, space, and freedom. But it also gave me one of the strangest and most unsettling moments of my life. And even though it only lasted a few minutes, the feeling it left behind stayed with me for a long time after. When I was 6 years old, I experienced something that stayed with me for a very long time, even though I didn't have the words to explain it back then. At that age, I had no idea what sleep paralysis was. I didn't know it was something many people experience at least once in their lives. All I knew was that something terrifying happened to me in the middle of the night. And for years afterward, I honestly believed I had come close to dying. We were on holiday at the time. That detail is important because everything already felt unfamiliar. The room I was sleeping in wasn't my own. The walls, the sounds, even the smell of the place were different. As a child, sleeping in a strange room can already make you feel uneasy, even if you don't fully understand why. I remember going to bed that night feeling tired but also slightly restless, the way kids sometimes do when they're not in their usual environment. At some point during the night, I woke up. At least, I think I woke up. Even now, I'm not completely sure where the line was between dreaming and being awake. What I remember clearly is opening my eyes and realizing it was completely dark. Not the normal kind of dark, where you can still make out shapes or shadows, but pitch black. I couldn't see the outlines of furniture or the faint glow of a hallway light. It felt like the room had swallowed all the light. Almost immediately, I realized something was very wrong. I couldn't move. I tried to shift my arms, but nothing happened. I tried to turn my head, but it felt locked in place. I don't even remember feeling my body properly. It was as if I was just a pair of eyes stuck inside a heavy shell. The panic set in almost instantly. At 6 years old, you don't stop to think logically about what might be happening. Your brain jumps straight to fear. I tried to breathe deeply, but I can't remember feeling my breath properly. It felt shallow, tight, like my chest wouldn't expand the way it was supposed to. That made the fear worse. The harder I tried to breathe, the more trapped I felt. My heart was pounding, but even that felt distant, like it wasn't fully connected to me. I wanted to call out. I wanted to scream for my mom or dad. I knew they were nearby, somewhere in the house. But when I tried to speak, nothing came out at first. My mouth felt heavy, unresponsive. After what felt like a long struggle, I managed to force out 2 words. "Help me." They came out as a weak wheeze, barely louder than a breath. I don't even know if anyone could have heard me. At the time, it felt like the absolute best I could do, like my body was fighting against me with everything it had. And then I saw it. From the darkness above me, a black shape began to descend. It didn't have clear features, at least none that I can remember now. It wasn't sharply defined like a person standing under a light. It was more like a mass of darkness, darker than the room itself. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it was coming closer to me on purpose. I didn't think it was a person. I didn't think it was anything human at all. My 6-year-old mind didn't have the language for that kind of fear. All I knew was that something was coming toward me and I couldn't escape. I couldn't move. I couldn't run. I couldn't even turn my head away. The fear was overwhelming. It wasn't just being scared. It was a deep, crushing terror that filled every part of me. I remember thinking very clearly that this was it, that whatever was happening meant I was going to die. There was no adult reasoning, no questioning. It felt final, absolute. As the black figure came closer, everything inside me shut down. I lost consciousness. When I woke up again later, everything was normal. The room was still dark, but it was the ordinary nighttime darkness, not the suffocating void from before. I could move my arms. I could breathe normally. My heart was still racing, but I was alive, awake, and in control of my body again. I didn't fully understand what had happened, and I didn't really talk about it at the time. I think part of me was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would make it more real. Another part of me worried that no one would believe me or that I would get in trouble for imagining something so strange. For years afterward, that memory haunted me. Whenever I thought about it, I didn't think of it as a medical or psychological event. I thought of it as something almost supernatural. In my mind, it felt like I had come face to face with death itself. The helplessness, the fear, the darkness, and that descending shape all blended together into one terrifying memory. It wasn't until much later in life that I learned about sleep paralysis. When I finally read descriptions of it, my stomach dropped. People described waking up unable to move, feeling like they couldn't breathe properly, seeing dark figures or shadows, feeling an intense sense of fear or doom. Some described figures sitting on their chest. The others described something hovering over them or descending from above. It was almost exactly what I had experienced. With that knowledge, I can now look back and understand what most likely happened. I was a child, overtired, sleeping in an unfamiliar place. My brain woke up before my body did. My dream state bled into reality, creating the hallucination of a black figure. The breathing difficulty and paralysis amplified the fear, making it feel life-threatening. With hindsight, I can even guess that the black shape I saw was probably my mom or dad checking on me in the night. Maybe they leaned over the bed to see if I was sleeping okay. In my half-awake, half-dreaming state, my brain twisted that ordinary action into something terrifying. But knowing that now doesn't erase how real it felt then. At 6 years old, it wasn't a medical condition. It wasn't a harmless sleep disorder. It was the most intense fear I had ever felt in my life. It shaped the way I thought about darkness, sleep, and being alone at night for years afterward. Even now, when I think back on it, I can still remember the feeling of being trapped inside my own body. I can remember the helplessness of trying to speak and barely managing a whisper. I can remember the certainty that something terrible was happening and that I couldn't stop it. It's strange how something that lasted only a few moments can leave such a deep mark on you. For a long time, that memory felt heavier than it should have. It didn't fade the way childhood memories usually do. It stayed sharp, vivid, and emotional. Understanding what it was has helped. It gave the experience a name and a place. It turned something terrifying and unknown into something explainable. But a part of me will always remember it the way I felt it then, not the way I understand it now. To that 6-year-old version of me lying frozen in a strange, dark room, it felt like I had brushed against death itself. And even though I know better now, that feeling stayed with me for a very long time. Pardon the interruption for just a moment. I hope these stories are keeping you on the edge of your seat tonight. If you're finding yourself drawn to these dark accounts, I'd love to have you join us. If you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We share new true horror stories every single day, and being part of the community is the only way to make sure you never miss a nightmare. A quick like and a comment also means a lot. It really helps the shadows spread a little further. But for now, let's get back to it. The darkness is calling. This is a true story that happened to my family almost 30 years ago, and even now it still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. It isn't something dramatic or loud, and there are no obvious answers to explain it away. It's quiet, slow, and unsettling in a way that stays with you long after you hear it. At the time, my cousin was 3 years old. She was an ordinary little girl in every way. She loved cartoons, toys, and being around her parents. Nothing about her behavior stood out as unusual, except for one thing. She had an imaginary friend named Bobby. At first, this didn't worry anyone. Lots of children have imaginary friends, and my aunt and uncle didn't think much of it. Bobby was spoken about casually, almost like another child in the house. My cousin would talk to him while she played, laugh with him, and sometimes even argue with him. From the outside, it looked harmless, even cute. But as the days went on, Bobby seemed to take up more and more space in her life. My cousin didn't just talk about Bobby. She treated him as if he were physically there. At mealtimes, she insisted that Bobby needed his own place at the table. She would ask why his plate wasn't set, and if one wasn't added, she would refuse to eat until it was. My aunt, not wanting to upset her, would sometimes place an empty plate and cup next to my cousin just to keep the peace. When my cousin watched television, she would drag a cushion onto the floor beside her so Bobby could sit comfortably and watch with her. If someone accidentally moved the cushion, my cousin would get upset and say they were being rude to Bobby. She spoke about him with complete certainty, like he was as real as anyone else in the room. My aunt started to feel uneasy, but she tried not to show it. She was a young mother and didn't want to overreact. Instead, she did what many parents do when they're unsure. She went to the local library and borrowed child-rearing books. She read about imaginary friends, childhood development, and phases children go through. Everything she read told her the same thing. Imaginary friends were normal. They often appeared around that age. They usually went away on their own. So my aunt decided to stop worrying. She told herself Bobby was just a phase, something my cousin would grow out of. For a while, life went on as usual. Then, a few months later during the winter, something happened that changed everything. My uncle had recently started a new job that involved shift work. That meant he wasn't always home in the evenings. One night in particular, he was working a night shift, leaving my aunt and my cousin alone in the house. The house itself wasn't unusual. It was a normal family home, quiet, warm, and familiar. But that night, the silence felt heavier. Outside, it was cold and dark. The kind of winter night where the world feels closed in and still. As the evening went on, it became time for my cousin to go to bed. My aunt took her upstairs, helped her change into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and did all the usual bedtime routines. Everything felt normal, almost comforting in its familiarity. As they were finishing up, my cousin looked up at my aunt and asked if Bobby was also going to bed. My aunt hesitated for just a moment, then answered the way she always had. "Yes," she said. "No, Bobby can go to bed too." They went into my cousin's bedroom together. My aunt read a bedtime story, making sure to include Bobby in the process, just as she always did. She tucked my cousin into bed and, by habit, tucked the imaginary Bobby in beside her. She kissed her daughter goodnight and told her to sleep well. My cousin's bedroom door was left open, and the hallway light stayed on. That was how my cousin liked it. It helped her feel safe. My aunt left the room and started down the stairs. She was looking forward to sitting down, having a cup of tea, and finally relaxing after a long day. She had just reached the bottom of the stairs when she heard my cousin call out from upstairs. "Mummy, you forgot to turn the light off." My aunt sighed quietly to herself. She was tired and didn't feel like climbing the stairs again. But it was a small thing. She turned around and started back up. As she reached the top step, something stopped her in her tracks. The light in my cousin's bedroom turned off. Before my aunt could even process what she was seeing, my cousin's voice rang out again. "It's okay, Mummy," she said calmly. "Bobby turned it off." For a split second, my aunt couldn't move. The light switch was on the opposite side of the room, near the door. It was high up on the wall, far too high for a 3-year-old to reach. My cousin was already tucked into bed, with the blankets pulled up around her. There was no way she could have gotten out of bed, crossed the room, reached the switch, and gotten back under the covers that fast. My aunt rushed into the bedroom immediately. My cousin was exactly where she had left her, lying still, eyes open, looking relaxed and comfortable. The room was dark now, lit only by the hallway light spilling in through the open door. My aunt stood in the doorway, frozen. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. She forced herself to stay calm. She didn't want to frighten her daughter. With a steady voice, she said goodnight again, told her to sleep well, and left the room. The moment she was back downstairs, she picked up the phone and called my uncle at work. She was so shaken that he knew something was wrong the moment he heard her voice. She told him what had happened, her words tumbling over each other as fear spilled out. He asked his supervisor if he could leave early due to an emergency at home, and they agreed. While waiting for him to return, my aunt sat downstairs. Every light in the house turned on. She didn't dare go back upstairs. Later, she told me that she was so afraid she didn't think she could have gone back into that bedroom, even if the house had been on fire. When my uncle finally got home, my aunt felt some of the fear drain away, but neither of them slept much that night. The next morning, my aunt sat my cousin down for a serious talk. She told her gently but firmly that she should not play with Bobby anymore. She explained that Bobby wasn't real and that it was time for him to go away. My cousin didn't cry, but she looked upset. She said Bobby didn't want to leave. She said he was sad. That was when my aunt lost her patience. Fear and exhaustion caught up with her, and she raised her voice. She told my cousin that Bobby had to go, and that was the end of it. After that conversation, Bobby was never mentioned again. Days passed. My cousin didn't talk to him, didn't ask about him, didn't leave space for him at the table. It was as if he had vanished completely. A few days later, during lunch, my aunt casually asked my cousin what had happened to Bobby. My cousin looked up at her mother with a puzzled expression, and asked a question that made my aunt's stomach drop. "What is a bitch, Mummy?" My aunt immediately told her she shouldn't say words like that and asked where she had heard it. My cousin answered calmly, without emotion. "That's what Bobby said when he left," she said. "He said he was leaving because of the bitch." There was no anger in her voice, no confusion, just a simple statement of fact. My aunt never asked another question about Bobby after that. To this day, no one in my family can explain what really happened. Maybe it was just a child's imagination, mixed with coincidence and fear. Maybe it was something else entirely. What makes the story so unsettling isn't just the light turning off or the timing or the word my cousin repeated. It's the certainty with which she spoke and the way Bobby disappeared the moment he was told to leave. Whatever Bobby was, he never came back. A few summers ago, my life felt like it had been knocked completely off balance. My husband and I were still deep in grief after losing his father to a massive heart attack. It wasn't sudden in the sense that people sometimes mean, because heart trouble had always been there in the background, but the actual moment it happened shattered us. One day he was alive, stubborn and familiar, and the next day he was gone. The house felt quieter in a way that had nothing to do with sound. Every room carried a weight that made it hard to breathe. On top of that, I had just been laid off from my job. There was no dramatic firing, no argument, no big explanation, just a meeting, a few careful words, and suddenly my days were empty and uncertain. Between grief and stress, sleep stopped coming easily. Nights stretched on forever, where I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing in circles I couldn't control. When I finally accepted that I wasn't going to sleep, I started finding ways to fill the hours so I wouldn't completely lose my mind. I spent a lot of nights on the computer, clicking through nothing in particular. Sometimes I cleaned. Sometimes I reorganized things that didn't need reorganizing. And sometimes, because we live out in the middle of nowhere, and because it gave me something solid to focus on, I cleaned our guns and sharpened our knives. It wasn't about being aggressive or paranoid. It was about control. When everything else in my life felt unstable, taking something apart, cleaning it carefully, and putting it back together felt grounding. Around that same time, we started having a strange problem with someone parking in our driveway. We live way out in the country, the kind of place people jokingly call the middle of nowhere, except it's not really a joke. There are no neighbors close by, no stores, no reason for anyone to be on our property unless they're lost or they have business with us. That's what made it so unsettling. Every so often I'd look out the window and see a car in our driveway that didn't belong there. By the time I grabbed the phone and called the sheriff, the car would be gone. Every single time. It was like whoever it was knew exactly how long they had before they needed to disappear. The deputies were polite, but there wasn't much they could do without catching the person in the act. After a while, even making the calls started to feel pointless, but the unease never went away. So there I was, one of those sleepless nights, sitting in the middle of the living room floor. It was hot, and I was barely dressed, just a tank top and underwear. I've joked since then that it seems to be the universal home defense uniform because emergencies never happen when you're fully dressed and ready. I had our Smith & Wesson shotgun laid out in front of me, cleaning it slowly and carefully, just wiping away dust, checking everything the way I'd done 100 times before. The side window was open, letting in night air and the sounds of the countryside. From where I was sitting, I had a clear view of the driveway through that window. I remember glancing up at it more than once out of habit. There was no car, no headlights, no movement, nothing that looked out of place. At some point, I heard rustling outside near the window. It was faint, the kind of sound you get used to when you live out there. Coyotes passing through, raccoons getting into things they shouldn't. owls landing on branches. I barely reacted. My brain filed it away as normal background noise, and I went back to what I was doing. Then everything changed in an instant. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the window, not low to the ground like an animal, higher, more deliberate. I looked up just in time to see two hands appear, gripping the window screen, fingers curling around the edges, testing it, trying to pop it out. There was no time to think, no time to feel fear in a slow, understandable way. My body reacted before my mind fully caught up. I didn't know I could move that fast, but apparently I could. In one motion, I chambered around, vaulted over the coffee table, and was at the window with the barrel of the gun shoved straight into the space where a face would have been. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember saying anything at all. What I remember is the look in his eyes when he realized exactly how badly he had misjudged the situation. Up close in the dim light, I could finally see that this wasn't some confused stranger or lost traveler. This was someone who had been watching, waiting, someone who thought he'd found an easy target. He froze for just a split second, long enough for the reality of it to sink in, and then he was gone. Hands vanished. Footsteps scrambled away into the darkness. By the time I could have shouted or chased or done anything else, there was nothing there but the open air and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stood there for a long moment, gun still raised, listening. The night had gone quiet again, but it didn't feel normal anymore. Every sound felt sharp, too loud, too close. Eventually, I backed away, locked every door, closed every window, and called the sheriff. This time there was no car to describe, no vague report, just the truth of what had almost happened. They came out, took the report, walked the property with flashlights. They didn't find him. They never did. But after that night, the strange car never came back. No one parked in our driveway again. No shadows. No unexplained disappearances when the phone came out. I don't know who he was. I don't know why he picked our house. Maybe he thought we were an easy target because we lived so far out. Maybe he'd been watching for a while, waiting for the right moment. Well, I try not to dwell on those questions too much because there are no answers that would make me feel better. What I do know is that grief, exhaustion, and routine almost made me underestimate what was happening right outside my window. I also know that instinct can be a powerful thing. That night changed how I think about safety, about awareness, about trusting the quiet. Living out in the middle of nowhere can feel peaceful, but it also means you're on your own when something goes wrong. I haven't seen him since, and I hope I never do, but I'll never forget how close that moment was or how quickly an ordinary sleepless night turned into something that could have ended very differently. When my family lived in Nigeria, it wasn't the kind of place most people imagine when they think of big cities or busy neighborhoods. Because of my dad's job, we were stationed in a remote area far away from anything familiar. The roads were rough, the nights were very dark, and once the sun went down, the world felt completely different. There were no streetlights like back home, no constant hum of traffic, no comforting background noise. When it got quiet, it got truly quiet, and that silence could feel heavy. I was a teenager at the time, moody and emotional in that way only teenagers can be. I missed my friends, I missed the life I had before, and I often felt trapped in a place that didn't feel like home. So when my parents told me one evening that they were going over to a neighbor's house for a while, I actually felt happy about it. Being home alone felt like freedom. No rules for a few hours, no small talk, no being told what to do, just me, the house, and my own space. I remember watching them leave, hearing the front door close behind them, and feeling that little rush of independence. I put on some music, wandered around the house, and enjoyed the quiet in a relaxed way. At that point, the darkness outside didn't bother me. I had been living there long enough that the nighttime atmosphere felt normal, at least on the surface. As the evening went on, I settled into my room. I don't even remember what I was doing exactly. Maybe reading or messing around on something to pass the time. The house felt still, but not uncomfortable. That calm lasted until it didn't. Out of nowhere, I heard loud popping sounds coming from outside. At first, my brain didn't know how to process it. The noise was sharp and sudden, not like fireworks I was used to back home. It wasn't distant either. It sounded close, like it was happening just outside the house or somewhere nearby. The sound echoed through the night, bouncing off the quiet, and my heart instantly started racing. Then it happened again. Pop, pop, pop. That's when fear hit me full force. The area we lived in had a reputation. Armed robberies were not uncommon. People talked about them quietly, like everyone knew the risk but didn't want to say it out loud too often. Even as a kid, I was aware of that danger. My parents had warned me to always be careful, to lock doors, to never open anything at night unless they were home. All of that came flooding back into my mind in an instant. Gunshots. That was the only explanation my brain could come up with. I didn't stop to think logically. I didn't pause to consider other possibilities. Fear took over completely. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I ran straight to my bedroom, dropped to the floor, and crawled under my bed like it was the only safe place in the world. I remember the way the dust smelled under there. I remember pressing myself flat against the floor, trying to make myself as small as possible. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. Every tiny sound made me flinch. The house creaked. Something outside rustled. My imagination filled in the worst possibilities. I started crying, silently at first, then harder as the fear built up. I kept thinking about my parents being gone. I kept wishing they were home. I felt completely helpless, trapped in a place where I didn't know the rules well enough to feel safe. The noises eventually stopped, but that didn't help. Silence came back, and somehow that felt even worse. I lay there under the bed, frozen, afraid that if I moved or made any sound, something terrible would happen. I didn't know how long it had been. Time felt strange. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. I just stayed there, shaking, replaying the sounds in my head over and over. What if someone was outside the house? What if they were waiting? What if my parents walked into danger? Every thought spiraled into something worse. I was a teenager, but in that moment I felt very small, like a child again. All the independence I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by pure panic. Eventually, after what felt like forever, I heard the sound of the front door opening, voices, my parents' voices. I didn't even think. I crawled out from under the bed and ran toward them, completely breaking down. I was crying uncontrollably, trying to explain what I had heard, barely able to get the words out. I must have looked completely unhinged, shaking and sobbing like the world was ending. They were confused at first, trying to calm me down, asking what happened. When I finally managed to tell them about the noises, about the popping sounds, about how I thought they were gunshots, there was a pause. Then my parents exchanged a look. And then they started laughing. Not in a cruel way, not at me, but in that relieved, almost embarrassed way. People laugh when they realize something obvious that slipped their mind. They gently explained to me that the neighbors had been setting off fireworks. Loud, cheap fireworks, the kind that don't sound fun or festive at all, just sharp and aggressive. It was New Year's Eve. I had completely forgotten. As soon as they said it, everything clicked into place. The timing, the noise, the fact that nothing else had happened afterward. My fear drained away, replaced by this heavy mix of relief and embarrassment. I felt ridiculous, but also exhausted. My body had been in full panic mode for so long that even knowing the truth didn't instantly calm me down. I remember just sitting there, still sniffling, trying to laugh it off while my heart slowly returned to normal. My parents reassured me, told me I was safe, told me it was okay to be scared given where we lived. They didn't make fun of me, which I appreciated. They understood that context matters. And in that place, those sounds could mean something very real and very dangerous. Even now, when I think back on that night, I can still feel the fear in my chest. I can still remember the helplessness, the way my mind immediately went to the worst possible scenario. It's funny in hindsight, sure. Fireworks on New Year's Eve, a simple, harmless explanation. But in the moment, it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. That night taught me something about fear, how quickly it can take over when you're alone, when you're in an unfamiliar place, when you already know there's real danger in the world around you. It also taught me how powerful context is. The same sound in a different country, in a different neighborhood, on a different night, would have barely registered, but there, in that moment, it felt like a threat. To this day, loud popping noises still make my heart jump for a second before logic kicks in. And every New Year's Eve, without fail, I remember that night in Nigeria, hiding under my bed crying, convinced my life was about to change forever, all because I forgot it was New Year's Eve. I want to start by saying that compared to some of the stories people tell, this one might sound small or even a little silly on the surface. Nothing dramatic happened, no one got hurt, there were no police, no break-ins, no clear answers. But that's exactly why it stayed with me. It was simple, quiet, and deeply unsettling in a way that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. This happened when I was still in school. I was an only child, and both of my parents worked long hours. Most days I came home from school to an empty house. That was normal for me. I was used to the quiet, used to letting myself in, dropping my bag, grabbing a snack, and killing time until my parents got home around 6 in the evening. Being alone didn't scare me, it felt routine. That day was no different at first. I walked home after school and got there earlier than usual, around 2 in the afternoon. The house was exactly how I expected it to be. Quiet, still, no cars in the driveway, no TV noise, no voices. I unlocked the door, went inside, locked it behind me out of habit, and set my stuff down. Everything felt normal. Almost immediately, I had to use the bathroom. Nothing unusual about that either. I went down the hall, closed the bathroom door, and sat down. The house was silent. No music, no TV, no phone notifications. Just that heavy, empty house quiet where you can hear the hum of electricity and the faint sounds of the building settling. I remember thinking about random school stuff, completely relaxed, not paying attention to anything around me. Then it happened. There was a loud knock on the bathroom door. Not a light tap. Not a polite knock. It was hard and sudden, like someone had knocked with purpose. It made me jump on the toilet. My first instinct was that one of my parents had come home early. That was the only explanation my brain would accept in that moment. Without even thinking, I called out, "Mom? Dad?" No response. I waited a second, thinking maybe they didn't hear me through the door. Maybe they knocked and walked away. That seemed reasonable. Parents do that. I shrugged it off, finished up, cleaned myself up, and opened the bathroom door. The hallway was empty. That's when the first crack of unease appeared. It wasn't panic yet, just confusion. I walked down the hall toward my parents' bedroom, expecting to see one of them there, maybe changing clothes or grabbing something. The bedroom was empty. The bed was untouched. No lights were on. No signs anyone had been there. That's when I pulled my phone out. I called my mom first. She answered at work. I asked her if she had come home for a minute and knocked on the bathroom door. She sounded confused and said no, she was still at work. Then I called my dad. Same answer. Still working. Still not home. No chance either of them had been there. The realization hit me all at once. I was alone in the house, and someone had knocked on the bathroom door. I remember feeling this sudden wave of fear rush through my body, like my insides dropped out from under me. My heart started pounding. My hands got clammy. I stood there in the hallway, completely still, listening. That's when I heard movement. It wasn't footsteps in the way you hear shoes hitting the floor. It was subtler than that. My house had old, creaky floors, the kind that made noise even when you tried to walk quietly. I heard that sound coming from the kitchen, that soft, unmistakable creak that only happens when weight shifts on the floorboards. Someone was moving. I didn't stop to investigate. I didn't call out. I didn't think about grabbing anything. Fear took over completely. I ran. I sprinted to my bedroom like my life depended on it. I slammed the door shut and locked it, then backed away from it like the door itself might open on its own. I stood there, barely breathing, listening for any sound. Every tiny noise felt amplified, the house settling, the refrigerator humming, the faint sound of air moving through the vents. I couldn't tell what was real and what my brain was making worse. I stayed in my room like that until my parents got home. I don't know how long it was. It felt like hours, but it was probably closer to 3 or 4. I didn't leave the room. I didn't look out the window. I didn't unlock the door. I sat on my bed, shaking, replaying that knock over and over in my head. When my parents finally came home, I rushed out and told them everything. They checked the house from top to bottom, every door, every window. Nothing was broken, nothing was open, nothing was missing. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs that anyone had been there at all. And that's what made it worse. If something had been broken, if a door had been unlocked, if there had been some clear explanation, maybe I could have accepted it. But there was nothing, just the knock, the sound in the kitchen, and the certainty that I had not imagined it. To this day, I don't know what happened. I've tried to explain it away in every logical way possible. Maybe someone knocked on the front door at the exact same time and the sound traveled. Maybe the house shifted and made a noise that sounded like a knock. Maybe stress or fatigue played tricks on my brain. I've gone over every explanation again and again. None of them fully fit. I know what a knock sounds like. I know the difference between a house noise and a person at the door. And I know I was awake, alert, and not imagining things. The knock was real. The sound in the kitchen was real, and the fear I felt was very real. What still gets me is the timing. The knock happened when I was at my most vulnerable, distracted, and unable to immediately respond. Whoever or whatever it was knew exactly where I was in the house. It wasn't a knock on the front door. It wasn't random. It was right there, inches away from me, separated only by a thin bathroom door. Even now, years later, I still think about it sometimes when I'm home alone. If I hear a sudden noise, my body reacts before my mind does. My heart speeds up. My muscles tense. I become hyper-aware of my surroundings. That moment changed the way I experience being alone. It didn't turn me into someone who believes in ghosts or the supernatural. It didn't give me answers. It just left me with a memory that refuses to settle neatly into logic. And honestly, that's the scariest part. Not knowing, not being able to explain it, just remembering how it felt to sit there, alone in my room, locked in, waiting for my parents to come home, wondering who or what had knocked on the door while I thought I was completely alone. I was a freshman in college when this happened, and even now, years later, I can still feel the fear in my chest when I think about it. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal to me that I walked home alone at night. My job was close to the dorms, maybe half a mile away, and I had walked that route so many times that it felt routine, familiar, safe, even. That false sense of safety is what still bothers me the most when I look back. I worked evening shifts, and most nights I would get off late. It was a college town, so late nights were normal. People were always out, especially on weekends. The streets felt alive even after midnight. I convinced myself that because there were bars, students, and traffic, nothing bad could really happen. I was young, stubborn, and overly confident in my ability to take care of myself. This particular night was a Friday. I remember that clearly. It was after 1 in the morning, which meant the bars had just closed. That detail matters because the energy in the area changed fast. 1 minute the streets were loud and crowded, and the next they felt oddly empty, like someone had flipped a switch. Drunk people were stumbling toward cars or apartments. Police lights flashed in the distance, and then, suddenly, there were long, quiet stretches with almost no one around. I left work and started my usual walk back to the dorm. The air was warm, the kind of night where everything feels still and heavy. University Drive was the main road I had to walk down. It was wide, with palm trees planted in a median down the middle, separating the lanes going east and west. I walked on the sidewalk, heading east toward campus, and my mind mostly focused on getting home, maybe grabbing a snack and going to sleep. That's when I heard yelling. At first, I didn't even look. A car passed by going west, and a group of guys leaned out of the windows shouting things at me, catcalling, laughing. The kind of behavior you learn to ignore as a woman, especially in college. I kept my head forward and didn't react. I told myself it was nothing, that engaging would only make it worse. But then I noticed the sound of the car change. The engine slowed and something in my gut twisted. I glanced over my shoulder and my stomach dropped. The car had turned around in the median. It was now coming back in my direction. Before I could fully process what was happening, the car stopped and I saw doors open. 2 of the guys got out. That was the moment fear truly hit me. It wasn't the slow unease you feel when something is off. It was sharp and immediate. My heart started pounding so hard, it felt like it was in my throat. Every instinct in my body screamed that I was in danger. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just ran. I took off down the sidewalk as fast as I could, adrenaline flooding my body. I wasn't a runner. I never had been. But fear does strange things. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. I could hear my breathing loud and uneven, and the sound of my footsteps hitting the concrete felt unreal, like I was watching myself from the outside. I knew the area well enough to make a split-second decision. I couldn't stay on the main road. There was too much open space, nowhere to hide. I veered off onto a side street that led onto campus. I knew this street was a dead end for cars, blocked by barriers, but there were paths and walkways for pedestrians. Behind me, I heard the car roar back to life. They jumped back inside and came after me. The sound of tires and an engine accelerating behind you when you are running for your life is something I will never forget. It felt like time slowed down. Every second stretched. Every movement felt heavy. I sprinted down the side street and cut hard toward campus, darting off the paved path and into a darker area near some bushes. I dropped down and hid. I crouched low, pulling myself as deep into the bushes as I could, trying to make myself small. Branches scratched at my arms and legs, but I didn't care. I was shaking so badly I was terrified they would hear me. I forced myself to breathe slowly, clamping a hand over my mouth to keep myself quiet. The car pulled into the dead-end street. I could hear doors opening again, footsteps on pavement, voices. They were close, too close. I peeked through the leaves just enough to see shapes moving under the streetlights. 3 of them were out of the car now. They were looking around, scanning the paths and sidewalks, trying to figure out where I had gone. I stayed frozen, barely daring to blink. Then I heard one of them laugh. "Damn," one of the guys said, sounding almost impressed. "She was fast." They stood there for a moment longer, talking among themselves, checking a couple of directions. Every second felt like an hour. I was certain that if they took one more step in the wrong direction, they would see me. If they had, there would have been nothing I could do. I knew that. I wasn't strong. I wasn't fast enough to outrun them on foot if they spotted me. Finally, they gave up. I heard them get back into the car. The doors slammed shut, the engine started, and the headlights swept across the area as they turned around and drove away. I didn't move. I stayed in those bushes for at least 20 minutes. I didn't check the time. I didn't check my phone. I just listened. Every sound made me flinch. A passing car, footsteps far away, even the wind moving the leaves. I waited until my body stopped shaking, until my breathing slowed, until I was absolutely sure they were gone. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak. I brushed leaves and dirt off my clothes and looked around, half expecting to see them again. The campus was quiet, peaceful, almost eerily so, like nothing bad had just happened. I walked the rest of the way back to my dorm as quickly as I could without running, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I got inside and locked the door behind me, I broke down. I sat on my bed and cried, the adrenaline crash hitting me all at once. That night changed me. Before that, I believed that as long as I was smart and aware, I would be fine. I believed bad things happened to other people, in other places, under worse circumstances. I learned very abruptly how wrong that belief was. After that night, I never walked home alone after work again. If I worked late, one of the guys from my floor walked me back, every single time. I didn't care if it was inconvenient or awkward. I didn't care if I felt embarrassed asking. My safety mattered more. Even now, when I walk alone at night, my senses go on high alert. I listen to every car. I watch every shadow. I plan escape routes without even thinking about it. That night taught me how quickly a normal situation can turn dangerous, how fast control can be taken away. I don't know what those guys intended to do if they had caught me. I try not to think about it too much, but the fact that they turned around, got out of the car, and chased me tells me enough. It tells me that ignoring them wasn't enough, that being on a familiar road wasn't protection, that being close to home didn't mean I was safe. I was lucky. That's the part that stays with me the most. I was lucky that I knew the area, lucky that there was a place to hide, lucky that they gave up, lucky that fear gave me speed I didn't normally have. And I think about how easily that luck could have run out. I was 15 years old when it started, and at first I genuinely thought I was losing my mind. It began quietly, in a way that didn't feel dramatic or dangerous, just small moments that felt slightly off. I would leave my house and notice a gold Dodge Intrepid driving slowly nearby. Sometimes it would pass me once, sometimes twice. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a common car. Gold wasn't exactly a rare color. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just a teenager with an overactive imagination. But then it kept happening. Every time I left my house, one of those cars would appear. Sometimes it was one gold Dodge Intrepid. Sometimes it was another. At first I thought it was the same car, but over time I realized there were two. Two different gold Dodge Intrepids. Different model years, different drivers. One of the men looked to be in his early 30s. He had dark hair and a mustache. The other man was much older, probably in his 60s, with white hair. I never saw them standing, only sitting in their cars. So I have no idea how tall or heavy they were. All I ever saw were their faces behind the wheel. For about the first month, I didn't tell anyone. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. No one else mentioned seeing them, and I didn't want to sound crazy. I would think, There's no way two grown men are following a 15-year-old girl everywhere she goes. That kind of thing doesn't just happen, right? Except it did. I couldn't leave my house without one of them appearing. Walking to the store, going to a friend's house, heading to school. There they were. Always close enough for me to notice, but never doing anything obvious enough that I could easily explain it. They didn't come to my house directly. They didn't knock on the door. They didn't speak to me. They didn't try to grab me or pull me into a car. At that point, it was creepy, but not outright terrifying. It felt like being watched, not hunted. Still, that feeling alone was enough to slowly eat away at me. Then one day, someone else saw it. I was walking with my boyfriend, and that day, the older man was the one following me. He kept driving past us, turning around and driving past again, over and over. I finally pointed him out to my boyfriend and told him to watch. We started counting, once, twice, 5 times, 10 times. By the time the same car with the same driver had passed us 15 times in a 6-block area, my boyfriend stopped laughing. He stopped shrugging it off. He believed me. That was the first time I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Fear because now I knew it was real. After that, more people noticed. My mom saw them. My adopted mom saw them. My brother saw them. Friends saw them. Even the police saw them. They were real. 2 men, 2 gold Dodge Intrepids, always nearby. And still, nothing was done. The police didn't have much to go on. The men weren't threatening me directly. They weren't breaking any clear laws. They were just there, watching, following, circling. That went on for almost a year. 15 months of never being alone. 15 months of knowing that every time I stepped outside, one of them would be there. Sometimes both. Every move I made felt observed. Every errand, every walk. Every normal teenage moment felt contaminated by that awareness. I stopped feeling like a person and started feeling like an object. Then came the night that changed everything. It was winter, cold, dark. I had a fight with my mom, the kind of emotional, explosive fight that feels unbearable when you're a teenager. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and stormed out of the house at 1 a.m. to clear my head. That was my mistake. I made it about 3 blocks before I saw him. The younger man, dark hair and mustache, sitting in his gold Dodge Intrepid. The street was empty. No other cars, no people, no open stores, no cell phone in my pocket, no weapon, just me and him. That was the first time I felt real fear, not the slow, creeping unease I had lived with for months, but a sharp, animal panic. I knew the area well, so I turned and ran. I cut through yards, ducked between houses, slipped into back alleys. I ran as fast as I could. Every time I came back out into the open, he was there. He kept getting ahead of me. No matter how I changed direction, no matter how I tried to disappear, he was always waiting, calm, patient, like he knew exactly where I would come out next. I made it home somehow. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I just remember slamming it behind me and collapsing inside, shaking. Something broke in me that night. For almost a year, I had lived under this quiet pressure. Always watched, always followed, never touched, never spoken to. That night made it clear how powerless I really was. I realized something terrible in that moment. If they wanted to kill me, they could. If they wanted to rape me, they could. And no one would be able to stop it. That thought snapped something inside me. The next day, the older man followed me again. Same gold Dodge Intrepid, same slow circling, same quiet presence. Then he did something different. He pulled up directly in front of me at an intersection and stopped. He didn't get out. He didn't say anything. He just sat there and smiled at me through the window. I lost control. All the fear, anger, exhaustion, and helplessness exploded at once. I ran at the car and threw myself against it. trying to smash the driver's side window with my elbow. I didn't care if I got hurt. I didn't care if I died. I just couldn't live like that anymore. He laughed. He waved at me. Then he drove away, leaving me standing in the middle of the street, screaming after him. I screamed everything I had been holding inside for months. "So if you want me, motherfucker, I'm right here. Come and get me." I don't know how long I stood there crying and shaking, but after that, something changed. They didn't disappear completely, but they backed off. They still followed me, but from farther away. They gave me space, like they had tested something and gotten what they wanted. The following spring, the older man approached me one last time. He asked if I wanted a ride. I said no. After that, they slowly faded out of my life. No explanation, no answers, no closure. To this day, I remember every detail. The cars, the faces, the way they moved, the way they smiled. The younger man drove a 1999 gold Dodge Intrepid. The older man drove a 2000 gold Dodge Intrepid. I even remember his license plate, MI tag of NJA328. They followed me for 15 months. They made direct contact once. And 12 years later, I still don't know who they were or what they wanted. Sometimes I wonder if they were testing boundaries. Sometimes I wonder if I was being prepared for something worse. Sometimes I wonder if the only reason I'm alive is because I stopped acting afraid. And sometimes late at night, I still worry they'll come back. Not because I think it's likely, but because once you've lived with that kind of fear, it never fully leaves you. It settles deep inside, changing the way you see the world, the way you trust, the way you move through life. I was 15 years old when it happened, and even now, years later, part of me is still that girl, watching a gold Dodge Intrepid circle the block, waiting for something I never understood. Back in 2008, when I was still very young, my brother, my mom, and I went on a trip to visit my grandparents. It was supposed to be a simple, happy family visit. Nothing unusual stood out at first. We arrived, spent time together, laughed, ate well, and enjoyed being away from home for a bit. I remember feeling calm and safe there. My grandparents' house always had that feeling for me, like nothing bad could ever happen inside those walls. It was familiar, warm, and full of memories. The next day, we were supposed to take a train back home, so everyone decided to sleep early. It was a normal night, quiet and uneventful. I went to bed beside my mom, feeling tired from the trip. I remember closing my eyes, thinking about how early we would need to wake up. At that moment, nothing felt strange. Nothing felt wrong. If someone had told me that night would change the way I see reality forever, I would not have believed them. At exactly 11:34 at night, I suddenly woke up. What woke me was the sound of a crow, not outside, but inside the house. I heard its voice clearly, loud and sharp. And when I opened my eyes, I saw a crow flying inside the kitchen. It startled me badly. My first thought was very logical. I assumed a window must have been left open and the bird somehow flew inside by mistake. Even though it was late and strange, I tried to stay calm. I got out of bed and walked toward the kitchen. The house was quiet and everyone else was asleep. When I reached the kitchen, there was nothing there. No crow, no sound, no open window. Everything was exactly as it should have been. That confused me, but I convinced myself that maybe I imagined it. Or maybe the crow flew out quickly without me noticing. I went back to bed and lay down beside my mom. She was sleeping peacefully. Her presence made me feel safe again, and slowly I drifted back to sleep. That is when everything truly began. I don't know how to explain what happened next in a way that sounds normal, because it wasn't. I suddenly felt like I was no longer in my body. It wasn't like dreaming. It felt real in a way dreams usually don't. I felt aware, conscious, like I was awake. but somewhere else. I found myself standing on a street outside the house. The night air felt heavy. Everything looked darker than normal, like the world had lost some of its color. Then I saw it. A figure. It was tall, extremely tall, and very lean. It wore a black hood that covered its face completely. I couldn't see any features, and just darkness where a face should have been. The figure moved slowly but confidently, like it knew exactly where it was going. I watched as it walked toward my grandparents' house. I felt panic rising inside me. I knew somehow that this thing was dangerous. I tried to move, tried to scream, but it was like I was stuck, forced to watch. The figure entered the house and began climbing the stairs. I knew where it was going. It was coming to the room where I was sleeping. My fear became overwhelming. Then suddenly I snapped awake. I was back in bed. The room was dark. My mom was still beside me. For a moment I felt relief wash over me. I told myself it was just a nightmare, a vivid one, but still just a dream. My heart was racing, but I tried to calm down. That relief didn't last long. Almost immediately, I felt something else. A feeling I had never experienced before and never want to experience again. It was a deep, heavy sense of dread. Not fear like being scared of the dark, but a powerful feeling that something was wrong. Something was watching me. I felt it standing near the doorway. I didn't want to look. Every part of me was screaming not to turn my head, not to confirm what I already felt. But somehow I forced myself to gather all the courage I had and slowly looked toward the door. It was there. The same tall, lean figure I had seen moments earlier. The black hood covered its face, but I could see its eyes. They weren't glowing, they weren't bright. They were dark, hollow, empty, like deep holes with nothing inside them. It stood there silently. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My body felt frozen. Then, without warning, the figure began to change. It didn't walk away. It didn't fade. It turned into dust, dark and thick, and that dust moved toward me. It entered me. The moment it did, I started choking. I couldn't breathe properly. My chest tightened, my throat closed, and I began wheezing loudly. It felt like something was crushing me from the inside. I tried to scream, but only broken sounds came out. Then suddenly, every light in the house turned on. To this day, I have no idea how that happened. No one flipped a switch. It was like the entire house was flooded with light all at once. My grandfather rushed into the room, clearly alarmed. He gave me some medicine, trying to calm me down and help me breathe. After that, I fell asleep again. The next morning, I was taken to a doctor. I explained what I could, though I didn't tell everything. The doctor dismissed it, saying it was just an allergic reaction. That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I was too young to argue. As we were leaving the doctor's office, something else happened. I noticed my body breaking out in hives. Large, itchy boils appeared all over my skin. They stayed there for a full week before finally disappearing on their own. That incident changed me, not just emotionally, but in ways I can't fully explain. After that night, many things in my life shifted. Strangely, most of those changes were good. I became more aware, more focused, more driven. It felt like something had unlocked inside me. At the same time, I was never the same again. Even now, years later, I still see that figure sometimes. Not up close. It doesn't approach me anymore, but I catch glimpses of it, watching from a distance, always observing, never speaking. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something supernatural, something psychological, or something else entirely. All I know is that it felt real, more real than any dream I have ever had. Doctors gave me simple explanations, but deep down, I don't believe them. Something happened to me that night. Something entered my life, changed me, and then stepped back into the shadows. And even today, I still don't fully understand what it was or why it chose me. I was around 14 when this happened. Old enough to feel independent, but still young enough to completely underestimate how close danger can be. At that age, you assume bad things happen somewhere else, to other people, in places you don't know. Home feels safe by default. It feels like a shield. I learned that night how thin that feeling of safety really is. The house I grew up in had a small garden at the back. Nothing fancy, just a patch of grass and a few plants my mom tried to keep alive. Along the edge of the garden was a wire mesh fence, the kind you can see straight through. On the other side lived our neighbors, and they had a dog named Priscilla. She was a shaggy, lovable thing, not very bright, but very enthusiastic about barking, especially at night. Priscilla had a habit of barking at absolutely nothing, or at least nothing we could see. Cats passing through the yard, leaves blowing the wrong way, shadows moving across the fence. It was normal for her to start barking in the middle of the night, loud and persistent, like she was warning the world about some terrible threat that only she could sense. Because of that, we had all gotten used to it. Her barking had become background noise, something you roll your eyes at rather than investigate. That night, it was around midnight when she started up again. I remember it clearly because the house was already quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens late at night. The TV was off, dishes were done, and the only sound inside was the faint hum of electricity and the occasional creak of the house settling. All the curtains and blinds were drawn, every window covered. We were sitting downstairs, while my mum and I winding down before heading to bed. Priscilla's barking cut through the silence, sharp and sudden. It echoed through the yard and bounced off the fence. She sounded more frantic than usual, barking in quick bursts instead of her normal, steady rhythm. My mum looked at me and asked if we should check outside just to be sure everything was okay. I barely thought about it. I shrugged and said something like, "Nah, Priscilla's probably just barking at a cat." I sounded confident, dismissive even. I had heard that barking so many times before that it didn't register as anything unusual. In my head, it was routine, a dumb dog doing dumb dog things. After that, we turned off the light in the room. The sudden darkness felt normal, familiar. We walked upstairs, said goodnight, and went to bed like any other night. I didn't look out the window. I didn't peek through the curtains. I didn't hesitate. At the time, I thought nothing of it. The next day changed that completely. It was daytime, bright and ordinary, the kind of day that feels completely disconnected from anything frightening. The sun was out, birds were making noise, and the house felt warm and normal again. That's when the neighbor's housekeeper came over to talk to my mum. She was a woman who worked there regularly, and my mum chatted with her casually whenever they crossed paths. I wasn't in the room at first, but I remember hearing the shift in my mum's voice, the way it went quiet, serious, almost tight. When I came closer, I could tell something was wrong just by the look on her face. The housekeeper started explaining what had happened the night before. She said that when Priscilla started barking around midnight, she had looked outside to see what was going on. From her side of the fence, she had a clear view of our garden and the side of our house. She told my mum that she saw a man standing outside, not just anywhere outside. He was standing right by the window, the exact window I had been standing in front of just moments before, talking to my mum and brushing off the barking as nothing. She said that when she looked out and made eye contact with him, he noticed her immediately. He didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he made a slow, deliberate gesture toward her, a motion that needed no words, a motion that clearly meant, "If you scream, I will kill you." My stomach dropped when I heard that part. The housekeeper said she froze. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just watched as the man stood there for a moment longer, then eventually disappeared into the darkness. She didn't call out. She didn't come over to warn us. She was too scared. She stayed inside and locked her doors, hoping he wouldn't come back. By the time my mum heard this story, it was already the next day. I remember the way the room felt when it all sank in. The air felt heavier, like it had thickened. My mind immediately went back to the night before, to the moment I had stood right in front of that window, to the sound of Priscilla barking, to my casual dismissal, to how close I had been to the glass, completely unaware that someone was on the other side watching us, watching me. The realization hit in waves, first fear, then disbelief, then a deep, unsettling sense of vulnerability. I kept replaying the moment in my head, imagining how easily things could have gone differently. What if I had opened the curtain? What if I had leaned closer to the window? What if I had gone outside to check? I thought about how confident I had sounded when I told my mum it was probably just a cat. How sure I was that there was nothing to worry about. That confidence felt embarrassing in hindsight, but more than that, it felt terrifying. We never saw the man again. There were no further incidents, no break-ins, no reports from neighbors. He appeared once, silently, and then vanished from our lives as suddenly as he had entered them. That almost made it worse. There was no explanation, no closure, no reassurance that he had been caught or scared off or moved on. Just the knowledge that at some point, in the middle of the night, a stranger had been standing outside our house, close enough to see inside, close enough to threaten someone who noticed him, and close enough that we could have crossed paths without even realizing it. After that, things changed for me. I stopped trusting nighttime sounds. Every noise felt suspicious. A creak in the house made my heart race. Barking dogs no longer sounded annoying or pointless. They sounded like warnings. I started double-checking locks before bed, even if I had already checked them once, sometimes twice. And the curtains. I check behind them constantly now. Every time I hear something outside at night, I pull the curtain back just enough to look into the yard. I scan the shadows, the fence, the corners where someone could stand unnoticed. I know it probably looks paranoid from the outside, like I'm some kind of nervous hermit peeking into the dark. But I can't help it. That one night rewired something in my brain. It taught me that danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it hides behind normal sounds you've learned to ignore. Sometimes it's standing inches away while you feel perfectly safe, convinced that nothing is wrong. The scariest part isn't that there was a man outside our window. The scariest part is how close I was to seeing him, how close I was to acknowledging his presence without understanding what that might have meant, how easily curiosity or caution could have put me directly in his line of sight, how easily my assumption that everything was fine could have turned into something irreversible. I think about Priscilla differently now, too. That not-so-smart dog might have been the only reason the housekeeper noticed him at all. Without the barking, he could have stood there longer. He could have moved closer. He could have waited. I don't know what his intentions were. I don't know if he was casing houses, watching people, or looking for an opportunity. Not knowing is what makes it stick with me. The unanswered questions, the open-ended fear. Years later, the memory still crawls up my spine when I think about it. Not in a dramatic horror movie way, but in a quiet, realistic way. The kind that makes you realize how fragile normal life really is. How easily something terrifying can slip into the background of an ordinary night and almost go unnoticed. I don't brush things off anymore. If a dog barks in the middle of the night, I pay attention. If something feels off, I trust that feeling. I would rather be cautious than dismissive. I would rather look foolish than be unaware. Because once you realize how close you were to danger without knowing it, you never quite feel the same again. Thank you for spending your night with me. I hope these lullabies stay with you, but not too close. If you found these stories chilling, please like the video and subscribe to join the family. Every comment and sub helps us keep the darkness growing. Get as comfortable as you can, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Sweet dreams.